I'm going to speak now about Act 10 and labor. I despise Act 10. I went to Illinois to stop Act 10. And you must remember the circumstances under which Act 10 was passed. The day before Act 10 was made public, the day before, the governor met with his cabinet and described what was going to happen as dropping the bomb. If you really want to solve problems, you don't drop a bomb. You bring people to the table and you work with people and you get the problem solved. And that's what should have been done. The changing of the law requires the votes. And I understand that you have to have 17 votes in the Senate, 50 votes in the Assembly, and a governor who won't veto something. But I also understand that the wise executive brings the workers to the table, listens to the workers, creates a fair working environment, and implements the suggestions of the workers. And that is exactly what I would do as the state's leader. That needs to happen. The specific situation related to the UW is a very bad situation that was, for whatever reasons, an outcome of Act 10. Senator Erpenbach has authored an amendment, which I voted for, to correct that. It needs to be solved in the legislature, and I will join Senator Erpenbach and the rest of the Democrats at pushing to try and solve that situation. Meanwhile, we will fight like hell out in the countryside to get the votes to reverse this legislation. Thank you for the question. Bruce.
I guess being one of the solidarity singers, I'd like to hear your opinion on what Scott Walker has done as far as enforcing the rules in the Capitol, as far as the arrest that took place over the summer, and just how you might have handled that.
I believe singing is a very great example of exercising free speech. It is protected under the Constitution. I also believe if you do not exercise your rights, you lose them. And the right to assembly, the right to petition your government, and the right to freedom of speech is part of who we are as America. And people should not be arrested for singing.
Do you think we should have to notify the DOA that we're going to be singing?
No, I do not.
Thank you very much.
What's your stance on the Ojibwa Nation with regard to sovereignty up north of the mine?
That's a very good question. The question is, what is your stance related to the Ojibwa Nation and sovereignty, especially with regard to the mine up north? I'm going to tell a little story to answer your question. I serve on the State Tribal Relations Committee. This is the only committee in the legislature that deals with international affairs. It is important that everyone here understands that Wisconsin lives with 11 sovereign nations. These are the tribes who were here 1,000 years before we were. In the specific question related to the mine, the bill that created this mine up north was extremely bad legislation and must be repealed. In addition, the wetlands bill that was passed in 2011 is also very bad legislation and must be repealed. The only jobs that this mine will create are jobs for lawyers. And there are 3 reasons why. The first reason has to do with the sovereign nations. When that water flows from the mine, where you will recall, the proposal is to destroy so many streams that they could make a road from Lambeau Field down to Camp Randall. That's the extent of the stream destruction we're talking about. When these streams are destroyed, the headwaters will be of the river that flows to the Bad River, the Lake Superior Chippewa bed of the Bad River will be destroyed. Their water supply will be destroyed. This violates the principle of protecting the sovereign nations and will most certainly end up in court. The time that first spade goes in to start that mine, it will end up in court. If for no other reason than because of the violation of the protection of the sovereign nations and their own clean water laws. But the problem is even worse than that. This bill was deliberately crafted to not follow the Army Corps of Engineers federal process for protecting clean water and clean air. They have a process set in federal law that's much longer than the process that was in this mine. The Army Corps of Engineers is now going to be forced to have a completely different environmental impact statement. When those two different environmental impact statements land right next to each other, they will most certainly be not identical, which means it is most certain that for the second reason, this will end up in court. And finally, the third reason is that Wisconsin is a signatory to the Great Lakes Compact. This is an international agreement that protects what goes into the Great Lakes. And all of the provinces and states have signed on to it. And dumping toxic-laden water into the Great Lakes will most certainly be a violation of that compact. So for so many reasons, this is not going to result in jobs. It's going to result in unending, expensive litigation. And it was a very bad bill. Thank you. Oh, sure. Sure. That's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. I live in the North American epicenter of sand mining. One county trunkload has 28 permitted mines. These are not your old farm gravel pits. These are mines that are 1,000 acres and are mining 500 million year old sand that is being mined through the water table. Chemicals are used to force this sand to clump together, to separate it. They're then put on trucks and railroad cars, and they actually come through Madison. I've seen them come through Madison with these cars filled with sand. A week and a half ago, Senator Tiffany, the senator who authored the mine bill we just spoke of, introduced another bill, Senate Bill 349. And that bill would take away the local town ability to create an ordinance under their police powers related to the sand mines. Now, local towns have responsibility to health and safety. That's what police powers are. Many of these ordinances have been written to force the mines to be good neighbors. So, for example, if they're blasting next door to you, they have to give the neighbor 24-hour notice if they're using explosives. If they take so much water that you no longer have a well, they have to drill you a new well. These are good neighbor ordinances. This bill would strip the local ability to be able to pass these ordinances based on police powers. But it goes much farther than that. It would affect the neighborhood here in Madison. Because the bill forbids any city, county, town, or village from passing any ordinance that affected water quality, water quantity, the monitoring of water, air quality, the use of explosives, or any damage to roads caused by a certain type of industry. Across the state, every community would be forbidden from doing this. I described it to the Capital Times as an extreme anti-environmental bill that is cloaked in sand mine jobs. Lest you underestimate the impact of this on our state, I have witnessed the very fancy pickup trucks with Texas license plates parked in front of the Buffalo County Courthouse. We are dealing with the oil and natural gas industry, which is money that Western Wisconsin cannot conceive of. They are paying 10 times the value of land to be able to get to this sand. And I can tell you, well, let me say it this way. There's a very powerful documentary that was filmed in where I live, in my neighborhood. And many of my constituents are in this documentary. I strongly suggest that you work with your community groups to get a hold of this documentary and show it here in this neighborhood. It's called The Price of Sand. And it is about the price the community pays for the fracking industry, the first step of the fracking industry, which is the mining of the sand. I'm sorry it took so long. It's a very passionate issue. yeah, I'm sorry.
Anyone who's seen you in the legislature as a senator knows how strong you are and how good you are at pulling apart and analyzing what a bill will be. And I've heard people say that though they would support you for governor, they don't want to lose your voice in the Senate. What would it look like if you ran for governor? What happens into your Senate seat, and is there a viable candidate who could take over?
Thank you. That's a very good question, and it's a question I hear a lot. There are 2 representatives in my Senate seat that are Democrats. Both of those 2 representatives want to run for my Senate seat. One of the representatives has already been on the ballot in my Senate seat, and I beat him 2-1 in the primary, so he knew he'd get him run against me again. But he's a wonderful man. They're both wonderful men. They both would be fabulous senators. My Senate seat, although it was very marginal back in 2010, as a result of the redistricting, it is one of the few seats in the state that has become more Democratic. And here is why. When I won in 2010, all of my colleagues, Democratic colleagues in swing districts around the state, lost. I was the only Democrat that was left standing in a marginal district. The Republicans knew that when they drew the lines. And the swing districts, in the line, they wanted to make solidly Republican. So they moved the entire city of Eau Claire into my Senate district with just 2 words on it. And that city votes roughly 60% Democratic. That made my Senate district sort of the island of Democrat votes in the sea of red western Wisconsin. So my 2 colleagues that both want to run for my seat, one of them, whoever won the primary, would have to screw up really bad to lose that seat for the Democrats. So thank you for the question.
And they're urging you to